Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about England through the Middle Ages. So welcome to Mr. Kenny's Medieval History class. If you haven't already, press that like and subscribe button to help out the channel to get me up in the algorithm. And let's begin. All right, so we're starting after Rome has left England. Rome abandons England relatively early on in the 400s, and it's because they're invaded. We have two different groups coming in mostly. We have the Angles and the Saxons, and we already had the Britons, Picts living there. And basically, these Germanic and Celtic peoples are going to wind up creating their own little kingdoms in England. But we're going to see that the Vikings are going to start attacking the British Isles, and there's going to be a need for unity. So we're going to have a guy named King Alfred, and he's going to be called Alfred the Great because he's actually going to bring the Angles and the Saxons together, and that's how we get the term Anglo-Saxon today, which many of the English claim as their descent. And one of the things he realizes is that the Vikings like to attack easy, soft targets that could give them relatively little danger and lots of wealth. So we found if he built castles, that the Vikings would not attack as much. All right, so what happens is when he unites these people, the area becomes known as Angleland. Now let's look at this. Angleland, pretty close to England. So we see the origin of how France got its name from the Franks. We have England getting its name from the Angles. All right, so he is going to unify the people together. He's going to protect them against the Viking invasion. He's going to wind up setting up schools, and he's going to be a very strong king. So he is going to wind up really changing the course of history for the British Isles here. And here we see a great statue of Alfred the Great. We see a tower that he built, some of the walls created for protection against the Vikings. So if you were paying attention, hopefully you should be able to tell me who united the Angles and the Saxons to fight the Vikings. Da-na-na-na-na-na. What was the kingdom called? Well, if you said King Alfred or Alfred the Great, you are correct. If you said Angleland or England, you are correct. Congratulations, you win imaginary no points. It was too easy. Come on, you're better than that. All right, moving on to the next point of English history that we care about for our class. All right. So we talked about the Vikings, and there's a reason why we talk about the Vikings before we talk about England. So we know that the Vikings were going all over Europe. One of the places that they conquered was northern France. Now you're thinking, why are we talking about France in our lesson about England? Well, you'll see. So because of the Norsemen, the Northmen, both of those, it becomes known as Normandy. And instead of going and just attacking, they decided to stay. They liked it. So you probably have heard of Normandy because of World War II, the famous invasion, where it's not the beginning of the invasion of Western Europe, because actually I guess Italy is in Western Europe. So yeah, the beginning of the invasion of Western Europe happens there in the 1940s. But right now we're talking about medieval times. Now, what happens is, so we have a Viking descendant who is ruling Normandy, and his name was William the Conqueror. Well, he's not the conqueror yet. So we know that the Vikings wound up ruling Normandy, and we know that they eventually get to Paris, and they make a deal where basically the ruler of the Normans gets to be called a Jarl, and basically he is a vassal to the French crown. So they get to rule Normandy, and they basically are loyal to the French king, um, but they get to reap the benefits of owning the land. They get the wealth, they get the produce. Now, what happens here, we see that we're going to have William being knighted by the French king. He's a successful military commander. And William is going to be the cousin of King Edward of England. Okay, so we see this William guy. He is ruler of Normandy, vassal to the French king. So he's under the French king, but he's related by, he's a cousin to the English king. Now, King Edward of England is going to die. Now, the nobles of England go and say, well, he doesn't have a son, he doesn't have anyone related in England. His only relative is this Norman, this person under the French king. We can't have the King of England, so if William became the King of England, we can't have him be a vassal to the King of France. That would put France above England. So instead, the nobles name Harold Godwin or Godwinson to English king. So they go and say, "Oh, Harold's a good guy. Let's make him the king." But William says, "Hey, wait a minute. No, that is mine." And he says that is not going to fly. So we're going to have William gather up a bunch of his knights and soldiers and cross the English Channel to invade England. Harold, the poor guy, he has Vikings actually going and attacking from the north, a huge army, unlike anything that we had seen from the Vikings, attacking from the north. He goes north and attacks, defeats the Viking invasion. But then he has to immediately go south to stop William from going and conquering his territory. So this poor guy, I mean, he's got his hands full. So 1066, one of the few dates that I request you remember and you know by heart. We've got 1054, 476, 1453, and 1066 is going to be another one of those. Now, this battle, it's famous. The Battle of Hastings. We have Harold's men. They're up on a hill. They have got this amazing shield wall. And, they've got axes. And so basically they have a wall of shields. And, then these long axes that could go attack over. It is famous for how strong the Anglo-Saxon shield wall was. So William sends his knights charging up the hill. They're repulsed. He sends his knights charging up the hill. They're repulsed. He sends his knights charging up the hill. They're repulsed. And here's the thing. Now, if Harold had probably kept his men on that hill with his shield wall, we might have a completely different history. We probably wouldn't be speaking the English language, as we'll learn later on. But we don't know why. We don't know if it was an order or if someone acted on their own. But the Anglo-Saxons, Harold's men, pursued the retreating Normans. Now you might be thinking, well, that makes sense. They're on the run. You better attack. We know from what we've talked about before in 5th and 6th grade that the majority of battle casualties happen when people are running. Not that many people get hurt when they go and are actually fighting because, there's shields, there's armor, there's all of these things. Most of the time people get hurt or killed is when their backs are running and then the attack comes. So Harold's men charge. And those Norman knights turn right around and dash the Anglo-Saxon forces to pieces. They wound up defeating this. And we have something called the Bayeux Tapestry, which some of you guys might remember from 2nd grade, Mrs. Brown spending a lot of time with. Now, this thing is 230 feet long. It depicts what happened in the battle. Now, legend has it that William himself drew his bow, shot Harold, hit him right in the eye, and killing him, and then winds up becoming the ruler of England. Now, the Anglo-Saxons, they resisted William in the beginning. He goes and thinks, well, what can I do to have control? And he is going to be the person who we believe introduces feudalism to England. So he goes and gives land to his loyal soldiers and makes them swear loyalty, the oath of fealty. Then, of course, they own the land, and then they have the peasants under them that do the work, and we have the whole system where the peasants produce the crops go to the lords, and, of course, the lords give protection. Now, one of the things he's also going to do is he's going to bring French to the court of England. Now, you might be thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it does, because Normandy is in France and they spoke French. Now, you might be thinking, but they probably spoke English. And no, they were speaking German. The Anglos, the Saxons, they were Germanic, the Utes. So we have these Germanic languages going in. So what happens is we have our English language today because of 1066. Now, granted, the English spoken, Old English is very different. It's much closer to German. Um, but what we have here is the melding of French, this Romance language, and the German languages coming together. And this is how we have the language that we speak today, which I think is pretty cool. So we're going to wind up seeing, the local officials, the sheriffs, like all that thing that comes from Normandy. And what happens is basically the Anglo, the Saxons, and the Normans, through intermarriage, it's eventually going to become a new people. And so that's what we have right here, this new culture coming up, which is going to be the foundation for what we have here in the United States eventually, which is pretty cool. So our two questions to see if you have been paying attention. So what was that name of region of France that was taken over by the Vikings? Think about how they're called the Norse or Northmen. And who was William the Conqueror? I'll give you a couple seconds. So, if you said Normandy, and of course William the Conqueror was the person who conquered England, if you wanted extra points that aren't real and imaginary, you could have said the cousin of King Edward of England. All right, so we're going to pause here. This was part one of our lessons on England. I hope you have a great day. I miss you all. Feel free to hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you all later.